Governor Scott Walker is a passionate champion of the Choice program. He has fought and has vowed to continue fighting for the enhancement and expansion of the Choice program. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in extending a warm welcome to Governor Scott Walker.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and thank you, Justice, not just for that introduction, but I think that personifies why we're all here. Think of the incredible success stories that we've had in Milwaukee and many others have had across this great country. It's more than just a statistic. It's stories like Justice's. For me, it's simple. Every child in this country deserves access to a great education. Every child out there, no matter what their background, no matter what their parents did for a living, no matter where they live, where they reside, what zip code they come from, every child deserves access to a great education. For me, that's a moral imperative. And sometimes people will say, well, you know, why have you gone on that path? As Justice mentioned, we did long before I was governor, long before I was county executive, even back to the early days, I was proud to be in the legislature, and we voted to support Tommy Thompson and the bipartisan group that voted not just to put in school choice, but to expand it so that faith-based, religious-based schools could be a part of that going forward. But for me, the reason I think it's a moral imperative is simple. I have two reasons. One's named Matthew, the other's named Alex. Those are my two sons. And as a father, and now as an uncle of two nieces who are in elementary school, and certainly today as a governor thinking about all the children in our state and others like them across the country, I realize it's a moral imperative. And for me, it's one that particularly of late, my kids have gone through and graduated from high school, but as I was mentioning to some earlier, I have a son who just finished a week ago his junior year at Marquette University in Milwaukee, the same place that Justice just talked about having attended in the past, and proud of him and proud of the fact that he's excelling at a school like Marquette, a wonderful Jesuit Catholic institution. I've got another son named Alex who just on Friday finished up his last exams. In fact, the last 2 days seeing him, he's still operating like he's recovering from those last little bit of cramming, but he just finished his sophomore year at the University of Wisconsin in Madison. And I tell people that because not only as a parent do I think about the moral imperative of giving every child access to a great education. As a parent now of two sons, one at a private Catholic university, one at a public institution, nobody looks surprised when I tell them about where my sons go to school. Because when we think about higher education, it's just normal that you might have a son or a daughter who choose to go to one place and another choose to go to another. The fact that one happens to be private and one happens to be public isn't shocking when it comes to higher education. And yet sometimes when many of us talk about giving those same sorts of opportunities, particularly to families who might not otherwise financially be able to have the means to those opportunities, to send a son or daughter to a successful school from kindergarten through 12th grade with those same sorts of circumstances, sometimes people are shocked about that. But I think fundamentally it's a moral imperative. It's why I believe all of you are here and others like you across this country have fought for educational choice for some time. I also want to add to begin with that I think it's not just a moral imperative, it's an economic imperative. It's an economic imperative. I think in my state a few years back beginning of 2010, the unemployment rate in our state was 9.2%. As of this March, it's down to 4.6%. It's 4.6% even at a time when the labor participation rate, meaning the number of people, adults who are in the workforce in our state, is over 68%, one of the highest in the country. And I look at that and I realize going forward, it's an economic imperative because we can't afford to have people on the sidelines. We've got to have as many well-trained, well-prepared young people who not only get a great education, but who are prepared to take on those jobs. Jobs that are not just open today, but as the baby boomers are at or near retirement, there's going to be a whole nother wave out there. In fact, this morning before I came over, I looked at one of our state's websites. We have over 84,000 job openings posted on one of our websites alone in our state. That tells me there's jobs out there, opportunities out there, but we need more people with the skills and the education, the qualifications needed. That means we can't afford to have anybody on the sidelines. That means we need to have people, young people who have access to a great education, be it in a traditional public school, in a charter school, in a choice school with a voucher, in a private school with a tax benefit, in a virtual school, or even a homeschool environment. Our goal should be to provide as many quality educational choices for parents as possible because I trust parents. I know know, in the end, if you give them the best choices possible, they're going to make the choice that is best for their son or daughter. I know that's what you believe as well. To do that, though, it's going to take, I think, a comprehensive plan. Now, let me share with you just for a few minutes about some of the things we've done of late and some of the things we've done over the years in my home in the state of Wisconsin. First off, I think about, providing educational choices. It doesn't just mean charter and choice and virtual and home. It means stepping up the game when it comes to our traditional public schools as well. Let me tell you a reason why that's so important. You see, back in 2010, the beginning of that year, there was a woman in the Milwaukee area named Megan Sampson, who was a first-year English teacher in the Milwaukee public school system. Now, Megan was just one of these great teachers, someone who excelled not just with the students, but with the parents, with her fellow teachers. In fact, she did so well in that first year, the English Teaching Council for the state of Wisconsin named her the Outstanding Teacher of the Year for all the English teachers in the state of Wisconsin. Not long after she got word of that recognition, she got a different kind of notice. She got told she was being laid off. Now, over the years, as I've told that story since 2010, people say, well, how could that be? Here was somebody that was a great teacher, would have been a great teacher in any district, suburban, rural, urban, you name it, but particularly in Milwaukee, a public school system that desperately needed great teachers who could connect not only with students, but with parents and others out there. How could it be that someone like her would be receiving a layoff notice? Well, years ago, even before I was governor, something I have to sometimes remind to the national press, because I had the New York Times write a story about this very situation, claiming that I was the cause for her layoff, even though I wasn't the governor till the year after. But they reduced money for schools in the past, even before I was governor. But in turn, they didn't give the schools any tools to deal with it. So what did they do under the old system? The last hired is the first fired. The last in is the first out. And so people like Megan Sampson, as great as they were some of the first people to leave a school system that desperately needed someone like her. Sometimes people ask, what did we do 4 years ago in the state of Wisconsin? What we did was simple. We took the power away from the big government special interest, the big government labor union bosses, in this case, who controlled so many of our schools, and we put it back into the hands of the hardworking taxpayers and the people we duly elect to run our schools out there. And in doing so, we opened the door to say that now in our state, seniority and tenure is gone. Schools can hire and fire based on merit. Schools can hire and fire based on merit. They can pay based on performance. That means we can put the best and the brightest in our classrooms and we can keep them there. And it's not just about hiring. I mean, one of the other interesting things along the way before these reforms a few years back, it used to be that nearly every school district, 424 school districts in our state, nearly every one of them had to buy their health insurance from one company, a company called WA Trust that just happened to be affiliated with the teachers union. When we changed that, when we put in place our reform, schools could then bid out their health insurance. You know what they did? They bid it out and they saved millions and millions of dollars, money they could put directly into the classroom, and they made changes and they moved forward. And in doing so, one of the things I'm proud of is, despite what you heard from the protesters, the 100,000 or more at the time around our state capitol some 4 years ago, today in Wisconsin our graduation rates are higher. Our third grade reading scores are higher. Our ACT scores are now second best in the country in states where more than half the kids take the ACT exam. That showed a remarkable turnaround. That showed something that you all have known, not just when it comes to public schools, but with choice and charter and other virtual options out there, that if you give people choices, it will raise the ability to educate our children at all different levels. And so I'm proud of what we did to make sure that we empowered our public schools to operate more like our successful charter and choice and private and virtual schools in the state of Wisconsin. I believe that can happen elsewhere around the country. Now, in addition to that, obviously, as Justice mentioned, as many of you well know, many of you were part of that fight and cause over the last 25 years. We're proud to be at the forefront of the school choice movement, of the educational opportunity moment in the state of Wisconsin. In fact, Justice talked about being at Mesmer High School, and one of the favorite doors I love going in is one where the gymnasium is there, is named after Tommy Thompson. Tommy Thompson was a great governor of Wisconsin who helped lead the way He was the governor 25 years ago when we created the first Milwaukee Parental Choice Program. People like the great Polly Williams, who, rest her soul, just passed away this last November. But people like Polly Williams and other great champions like the Mitchells and certainly Dr. Howard Fuller and others helped lead the way, first to put the program in, and then I was proud to be a part of the cause in the legislature when we expanded it so that faith-based, religious-based schools could be a part of it as well. And the idea all along was to say that we wanted to make sure that we improved the quality of families in the Milwaukee area to have the choice that was best suited for their son or daughter. Just like I talked about my sons being one at a public, one at a private college and university, the same being true here. It didn't dictate which choice that was. It just said we're going to give as many quality choices, particularly for families who would not otherwise have the means to do so. So we were proud to be at the forefront. And I'm particularly proud to have built on that since, over the last 4 years, since I've been honored to serve as the governor of Wisconsin. I remember listening to Justice talk about it, I can remember years before being governor, when I was the county executive, as many of you know, we were under a little bit of threat. The previous governor didn't much care for the choice program. They put some barriers and caps in place. I remember being over at one of the other schools, St. Marcus, one of the great Lutheran schools in the Milwaukee area, one of the high performers, one of the schools I just loved to go and visit, but went over there and did some videos and some ads to try and draw attention that to at least sustain the movement during those lean years before we had a change in leadership in our state government. And I was glad that we sustained it, but it was nice to be able to lift those burdens. And over the last 4 years, we've lifted the cap on the number of students in the Milwaukee program. We've lifted the cap on the number of schools that can participate, and we've lifted the income levels so that not only low-income families, but middle-class, working-class families in the city of Milwaukee can now participate. You know why that's so important? It's not just important to make sure that families that financially may never have a chance to provide that sort of great education at a private school can do that, but increasingly what we found is if you want a vibrant urban area, in our case, if you want a strong city of Milwaukee, you got to have a good middle class. You got to have a strong and vibrant middle class. And for a number of our families we saw over the last 4 years, they were making too much money to qualify for the voucher, but making not enough, particularly if there were multiple children in the family, to be able to afford to send them to the school that they so desire. And so for a lot of those families, maybe dad works at a factory at Harley-Davidson or another plant somewhere in the city of Milwaukee. Mom might be a nurse at the community hospital within the neighborhood. They got 3 or 4 kids. They want to see great education. They don't like the public school in their neighborhood. They don't see a viable option out there, but they weren't qualifying for the voucher before. Instead, by lifting the income levels to include that range of working class citizens in our state as well, it allowed us to provide that opportunity in the city of Milwaukee to reinforce the strength of not just the quality of education, but keeping families like theirs, families that could strengthen and empower that city to be as great as it can be going forward. And so we were pleased to do all that. We not only made those changes in the city of Milwaukee, we added to it. We started to grow. We went to Racine, which was another urban area nearby the city of Milwaukee that was challenged and where there was great opportunity to build on educational success. And then 2 years ago, in our last state budget, took some work with the legislature, but we were able to go beyond just Milwaukee and Racine and expand it statewide. Granted, with some caps along the way, ones we hope to continue to phase out of. But we were able to put in place a statewide school choice program. And I want to tell you a story about why that was so important. Last fall, I met a mom from Appleton by the name of Dina. Dina introduced me to her son and her youngest daughter, who were both involved in a K-8 school in the Appleton area. And they were one of the first families to participate in the statewide expansion a couple years ago. Now, Dina told me about her family and a story similar that had been passed on, because Dina originally met my lieutenant governor earlier in the summer of 2014, and the story stuck with it so much when Rebecca Clayfish, who's a great champion for school choice as well, had told me about this story about Dina from Appleton. And I wanted to meet this family, not just hear about the story. So I met with Dina, met her son, met her daughter, later talked to her husband and older children as well, and why that's so important to talk about the impact of not just what we've done in Wisconsin, but what we're trying to do and are doing across this great country. As Dina told me in the story of a couple years ago, her son was just about flunking out from his class. His test scores were poor. He hated school. He was being bullied on the playground and in the classroom. School was just a horrible mess for him. And because of all that, and because of how much Dina cared about her son and her children, she was one of the first to literally run into taking the school choice expansion, to taking that voucher and going to the school where her children attend today. And she told me about how transformational that was, about how this son who hated school, who was being bullied, had seen his test scores double. He was doing great in school. In fact, he liked school so much he had signed up to be in the band to play the trumpet. He had just made the football team. This kid looked me in the eye, shook my hand, and told me thank you, because he loved his school, and he loved that opportunity, and he knew from his mother that because of the work that we in the state legislature had done, he was given that chance to have educational success. And like so many families I've met throughout the years, she wasn't trashing the public schools. She said, you know, hey, it just wasn't right for us. The school he went to wasn't right for us, but we were desperate to find the right place for our son. The reason this story was so compelling to me was not just after I met her, but why I heard about her in the first place. You see, late last summer, she came and bumped into Rebecca Clayfish, our lieutenant governor, at an event where she was trembling. And the reason she was trembling was because my opponent last year, when I was up for re-election, had said that if she was elected governor, she would end the statewide expansion of school choice. As a mom who saw what it meant to her son, she was afraid. She wasn't afraid politically. She was just literally, personally, physically afraid of what that would mean if her son had to go back to the circumstances he was in before. I tell you that because these are the stories that we're here for. This is why we want to provide as many quality educational choices as possible, and so that we can hear the success stories of families like Dina's, to ensure that no matter where someone lives, no matter what their background, no matter what their parents do for a living, that's essentially, Senator Lieberman, you said it so well earlier today when I heard you, that's a part of the American spirit. That's the American dream. I love meeting people from around the world who say, you know, the reason I came here was not to become dependent on the government. The reason I came to this country was because in America, it's one of the few places left in the world where it doesn't matter what your class, doesn't matter what your parents did for a living or where you came from in America. It's one of the few remaining places in this entire world where the opportunity should be equal for all of us, and the outcome should still be up to each and every one of us. That's what you're doing in the educational choice movement. That's the power of choice. And so I want to tell you thank you in every way that you do it, because we're pleased. We haven't just expanded school choice. We haven't just taken on reforms in our public schools. We've expanded, and we hope to expand even more in this next budget, the opportunities we can provide in our charter schools. Although one of the great things of our public school reforms is now every school in our state, every public school can essentially operate like a successful charter school if they only take on the reforms that we've given them. It's part of the reason why we want to expand those options. It's not just to provide more options, but to put pressure on our public school districts to use the very reforms we've given them to operate more like successful charter and choice and virtual schools as well. And so we're expanding our abilities when it comes to charter schools. We're lifting the caps on virtual schools. We're providing course options so that those families who choose in their homes to educate their children have more abilities to do that going forward. To me, whether it's a traditional public school like the ones my sons went to, a choice school, a charter school, a private school, a home school, a virtual school environment, we need to provide as many options as possible. And finally, I'd just say, looking at not just where we're at in Wisconsin, but where we can be in Washington, our nation's capital. I think some of the most powerful things we can do is take so much of the responsibility and the resources that are now focused in our nation's capital and send them not just out to the states, but to our schools, and most importantly, to our parents. Because again, I trust parents, and I know in the end, if given the right choice, if given the right options, if given credible options out there, they're going to make the choice that's in the best decision of their sons and daughters. It's why I raised concerns, for example, about Common Core, and have set that aside, because I said I want people at the local level making decisions. In our local school districts and with our parents and educators and others, it's the same way that I think going forward, we should have a real debate in this nation about taking resources out of Washington and sending them back to the states, sending them back to our schools, sending them back to our parents. But in an area where we don't have a state, I also think we need to stand first and foremost strong to say that if we're going to live in a nation where we have a capital that's in the District of Columbia, we should make sure that Republican and Democrat alike, we do everything we can to make sure that every family that lives in the capital city of this great country should have the best choices possible going forward. That's something we should unite on together as a country. And so thank you for the chance to share with you today. Thank you for so many of you along the way who, long before I held office in Wisconsin, who helped Tommy Thompson and Polly Williams and Susan and George Mitchell and Dr. Howard Fuller and all the other folks who've been great leaders in the school choice movement in Wisconsin. Thank you for those who've taken it, Betsy DeVos and all the others who've been such great champions here and others across the country. I would just encourage you that if a state like Wisconsin, a blue state like Wisconsin that hasn't gone Republican for president since 1984 can make inroads that, as we saw with, and I was honored to serve with Polly Williams, it don't matter whether it's a Democrat or Republican. If we decide that once and for all this isn't a red issue or a blue issue, this is a red, white, and blue issue, the future of our children in this country is of a higher importance than whether or not we can score political points one way or the other, that we need to be on the front lines, as you are here. We need to encourage people all across this great country to be on the front lines of providing as many quality educational choices as possible, not just in Wisconsin, not just in Louisiana, not just in Indiana, but in every state in this great country. And we need to have leaders in Washington who understand the importance of sending that power, sending those resources right back down to local communities and ultimately to parents. I think in the end, a lot of the other problems we talk about on a day-in, day-out basis will be a lot easier to deal with for coming future generations if only we give them the great educational choices that are available today and many more in the future. Thank you very much.